Thank you, Professor Dubin, for... Can we have quiet, please? Thank you, Professor Dubin, for a very thoughtful paper. And certainly, for those of us in this movement, the Haskalah has had enormous meaning for our movement, continues to have meaning for the movement, and certainly the slogans, dare to know and dare to act, we like to think are our slogans. So, thank you.
I know, I felt that I was treading perhaps on the holy ground of foundational myths.
Indeed.
And, the holy of holies, in which I best be careful.
That's the poetic truth.
Comments from our faculty. Yaakov.
First, I want to thank Professor Dubin for the lecture, because it brought up again the main theme of enlightenment and also the main fault of enlightenment. The fault of enlightenment is the division between... I say the fault of enlightenment is this division between human and Jew. It is clear to me that you cannot be human without being national, because there isn't a subnational or a supranational society, and you cannot become human unless you are in a family, in a community, and in a nation. Therefore, this division was a mistake. It had its reasons, of course, as we heard, but we have to get away from it. The street and the home and everywhere else where a Jew is human, he is human and a Jew, and it cannot be divided. The great achievement of enlightenment is the rational approach to irrationality. I think that Freud, from this point of view, is the representative of a rational approach to irrationality. And we have to admit, together with him and with others, that we are irrational creatures. And that in us there are many, many irrational things. The difference is only, should we deal with this irrational thing by inflicting on ourselves religious duties which have no rational explanation or no moral explanation? Some of them have, but some of them haven't. Or should we approach our irrationality in a rational way? This is the achievement of enlightenment. We are irrational because we are creatures of desires, we are creatures of complexes, we are creatures with a subconscious, and all those things can be treated in a rational way and can be approached in a rational way. And we also have to admit that there are many things which we cannot explain rationally. And this is also one of the achievements of enlightenment. A rational approach to human beings is to admit that not everything can be answered, that there are questions without an answer, and that there are things that don't have an explanation. Maybe don't have an explanation yet, maybe won't never have an explanation. But culture gave us the possibility of dealing with ourselves not only through rational deliberation or through rational thinking and research. It gave us the possibility to deal with ourselves, to see ourselves, to represent ourselves through art. And what I spoke yesterday about poetic art or poetic truth or human truth means that there are things that cannot be expressed in rational terms, and therefore we do express them in poetic terms, in mythological terms, or in other terms, which we cannot translate into a paraphrase. We cannot paraphrase it into rational formula. So, working on these two levels of approaching human beings in a rational way and admitting their irrationality, of understanding that there are things that we can deal with them rationally and things that we cannot explain rationally. And at the same time, understanding humanity and understanding ourselves in poetic terms, through an education which will include art, poetry, and literature, this is actually the way of the good enlightenment. And I believe that we are continuing in this way. I believe that there are many religious people who continue in this way, if they are wise enough to get rid of any rule that is immoral, like anti-feminist rules, for instance, like the separation of men and women in synagogue, for instance, like the exile of women from the main hall of the synagogue, or the prohibition of women to touch the Torah or to speak with the Torah, and this is the Hasidism. These rules are immoral and they should be prohibited. I believe that any Hasidic or Orthodox community that is supported by the state should be prohibited of doing injustice to half of the Jewish people. This is a rational way of dealing with irrational things. Of course, it has nothing to do with the private beliefs of people, and if somebody believes that a male is better than a female, it's his private business. He's Meshuggah, but it's his private business. If it becomes an institutionalized thing, and if the state is involved, we should use the same legal means that we are using against cruelty against children or against cruelty against other creatures, because the moral and the rational explanation of deeds, not of beliefs, of deeds, should be the rule. And the Enlightenment gave us the possibility of finding out, or at least of trying to find out, what are the best rational and moral ways to deal with our irrationality.
Did you want to respond?
I don't have a particular response
okay.
to that comment, so
Fine.
maybe we'll
Okay,
hear what else
Stephen.
people want to say.
I've written out five questions. They're nuanced. They're interesting. I'd like to press Lois to expand on some points that I felt she might have moved over a bit too quickly when she spoke about the early nationalism's understanding of Haskalah and early nationalism's notion of a lyrical past and future. I'm willing not to ask them, and I urge the other panelists to do the same. We're in a room with 300 remarkable people, crowns, jewels on the crown of Israel. I've never appeared before a lay audience that has impressed me as much. It's difficult to get many of us out of our studies. And my guess is you're not going to see a number of us on your stage for a long, long time. Yemot HaMashiach. So, and not because of lack of perhaps desire, but let's talk with you. And so, I mean, I'm willing to forego. It would have taken me 3 minutes to ask this question.
No, 3 minutes per question, so we were up to 15 minutes.
Would have
Stephen,
responded.
right.
I would have pressed
Half
her.
an hour.
There's 6.5 minutes. Right there. It's on the table. I encourage others to do the same.
Stephen, I would love to hear your question. Yeah, because I
They're
think
lost.
I've mutilated it. I can't. I'll defer to others then.
And as usual, I defer to Steve.
I have, what we can do is start the open discussion now at this time, but I would like to ask a question first. Okay. My question is, one of the critiques of the Enlightenment that I've heard, which has been negative, I had a discussion about a week ago with somebody who brought this up, and I found it rather intriguing. One of the realities of Jewish life by virtue of the Enlightenment and of Christian life is that now the divisions are no longer vertical, they're horizontal. So I can more comfortably talk to a liberal Unitarian, a liberal Presbyterian, a liberal Congregationalist, a liberal Catholic, than I can to a Lubavitcher. Because the premises on which we operate are Enlightenment premises. So in the end, it applies to our socializing. Most people who are Enlightenment Jews have great difficulty keeping Hasidic friends. I mean, so what do you talk about? What do you do? So what the Enlightenment has done, and it's also true in the Christian world, liberal Catholics have great difficulty talking to conservative Catholics and so forth. So the divisions, the old division, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, suddenly disappear and new horizontal lines emerge, which are very powerful in our society, and they determine the way we socialize. We're suddenly finding that the division is this way, and that in fact, Messianic Jews can talk more comfortably to Hasidim than they can even talk to, certainly to Christians. So I want to address to you the question, how do you view this new development? Because in the end, the category simply Jewish, Christian, and so forth as distinct cultural entities become far more ambiguous. I'd like you to respond to that, if you would.
I respond to it with alarm and confusion. Because I'm very well aware of what you're saying. And I think we see it in this country. Perhaps we see it to a far greater degree in Israel. I really ask myself, probably the same question you've been asking yourself, which is, what do I really have in common with, all the different stripes of Jews? So there's some who there's no problem, right? I mean, those who, I've obviously staked out my position. In some way, I see myself as an heir of the Enlightenment. On the other hand, I see religion, as a continuing vital force. And I would disagree with Yaakov Malkin on one point, though not on a lot of what he said. It's not only, I think, that the irrational is important in terms of understanding, for example, in poetry, literature, art, the world of representations. I think there's the realm of deeds and actions. Sometimes people some Jews find it meaningful to pray in Hebrew, in the language of the tradition, to God, even though, if you ask them, do they believe in God, the answer is no. But they may still find the experience in community, perhaps with people who they like, with melodies that they like, in a language which they like. They still may find the experience meaningful. So what I'm trying to say is it's not just, everything that we do in life, we don't always evaluate according to strictly rational or moral criteria, though we certainly should apply those, very often. So, now to get back to your question, so I ask myself, and here, I find the kind of work that Ada does fascinating. But if I leave the world of scholarship, and I just speak as a Jew today, I don't have a lot of sympathy for certain Hasidic sects. And particularly with the political place that they occupy, I get very alarmed. So I ask myself, what do I really have in common? What do I want to have in common? Do I want to have anything in common? And I don't really have an answer, because on one level, I know what's in common. It's a shared inheritance, which had religion at its core. We may see the religion differently. We certainly practice it differently. But there are texts, there's language, there are symbols, there are some ceremonies that we probably do share in common. There probably are some values. But is that only theoretical if the whole social manifestation of it is so, repugnant one to the other? Then I really don't know how to answer the question. But I've posed it to myself increasingly, very much along the lines that you raised.
Well, that
So I'm interested to hear from others, but I certainly don't have an answer.
I would like to hear a response. Yeah,
Yehuda wants to-
Yehuda, yes.
I don't know whether you'll accept this idea, and I'm not sure that it's correct. I've got no experimental proof. But I wonder whether the answer may not be that what you have in common with the people you dislike most in the Jewish religious or political world is that you disagree with them on the same tradition. In other words, when you have a disagreement with a Catholic on the Bible, it's a purely scholarly or friendly discussion. When you argue with a Lubavitcher Chosid, then so the paradoxical situation is that we are a culture that is based on the commonality of total disagreement on all our traditions.
I would just, as usual, you put it very well. But there is a question of a common frame of reference, and are there certain ideals that we would all be claiming to be trying to implement? I mean, if there may be a group with whom I disagree violently, politically and religiously. So what does it mean, however, that they speak in the name of Torah, and I would be willing to speak in the name of Torah values too? Even if we may overlap a little bit on how we see that, and we may disagree a lot. But it is still perhaps a common frame of reference. I'm not sure how much beyond that I can really go.
And now, Renee, you're the chair, so do you want to recognize the people who are...
Sure.
By the way, I think... all right, fine. Okay.
What I'll do is I'll recognize somebody, stand up, and then I'll repeat the question through the mic. So if you can speak real loud. Ruth?
This isn't really a question, it's a comment on the last question. I think what we share with the Lubavitchers and all other members of the Jewish people is our peoplehood. It's kind of like being members of the same family. You don't agree necessarily with your brothers and sisters in a lot of ways, and yet you care very deeply about them and about what they do believe, and maybe when you disagree with them, you disagree, as you would have said, more vehemently because they are your family and you do care. And I don't know how you would define it any differently.
Did everyone hear the question? Or a statement, actually. It's not a question. Okay. Yvette.
With Hasidism or other
It's
people.
just an example.
Yes, I just think that I choose my friend, but I don't choose my family, and they are part of my family. We could say like that.
Okay. We've got Ruth. I'm sorry, Jane.
To me, the critical question that has come up with the Hasidim and with the Enlightenment and so forth, the critical distinction is between people who believe a certain way, not between people who believe a certain way that's different from the way I believe, but with people who insist that I should believe the way they believe.
Okay, we have a person in back of Jane there.
On this last matter, I have a direct quote from the Rebbe who said that it is better to believe in Jesus than to be a non-believer. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't agree. You?
I don't believe it is a direct quote from the
I've covered all.
Okay, Susan.
Yeshua opened the way to Messiah, so why not?
I would like to posit the suggestion that the commonality that we have with the Hasidic movement and other movements in the Jewish world is that I don't know of any Lutherans or Catholics who are sitting around and debating what it means to be Jewish and whether the Jewish people will survive. Now, we come at that from very, very different directions. And that leads me to kind of a question and a comment that I had for Ada that I
began during the break. And that is, I guess, as a layperson, not aware of the scholarly literature on Hasidism, I was sort of taken aback with the tone of the paper, which is refuting an argument that there has been no change in sort of the Hasidic philosophy in the Hasidic world, because it seems to me that those of us who walk down the street in northeastern cities would not have been accosted in 1922 by somebody who wants to know if you're Jewish. And that the New York Times would not have on its front page every Friday the directive, Jewish girls and women light Shabbat candles. And that the Hasidim have stepped into a void which I believe may be a result of the Enlightenment concept of universality. And that is how those of us who have a secular relationship, an Enlightenment relationship to our Jewish identity, conceive of ourselves. Those of us in this movement don't have any confusion. But what we have called the unaffiliated Jews have a tremendous amount of confusion. And they are the people who see the Hasids as authentic Jews, and they are the people who pick up the phone for the Chabad telethon and charge $100 or $200 or make the donation that allows that virulent minority to continue. And I guess that isn't really a question, but how do you see that process, and are scholars looking at the effect which the Hasidim are having in this larger world rather than within their own theology?
Do you want to respond?
Well, simply to agree with you that of course this is new and it would not have happened in 1922, and that was the point I was trying to make. I'm glad to see that you did not find the point needed to be made. It was self-evident for you. But I can tell you that there is a whole body of literature that is still being produced now and was until very recently, which claims nothing happened and it's about to disappear. So it is a very recent thing. You're aware of it, I'm aware of it now, but 20 years ago, neither of us would have been able to predict it, I think, that this is what is happening. Now, whether or not you recognize that as something genuinely new developing within Hasidism or not is up to you. I would argue yes, and I think it deserves to be studied, and it's extremely interesting, and it has a wider context in which similar things are happening in other communities, and that'll be another area to investigate. Other people would say, no, it's nothing to do with Hasidism.
It's 4 o'clock, so what I wanted to suggest is that after we allow people who wish to depart, because it's 4 o'clock to depart, that we then reassemble, and I would like to invite the 3 colloquium speakers who are here from today, if they wish to remain, so that people might, for a little while, so that people might ask questions or address questions. No, just a moment.
You must allow Steve to stay.
Yeah, Stephen can stay.
I'll only stay if the Meyers stay too.
The Meyers, anybody who wants to stay. Right, great.
To the floor.
And now I have an. Before, I'd like everybody to be seated. I just want to take 1 minute with regard to announcements. We've had, I think, a very exciting day, and this evening promises also to be an exciting time. There will be no dinner here, but at 8 o'clock we are presenting a very special cultural program in the spirit of a celebration of Jewish culture. It's called Elijah's Violin, the Sound of the Jewish People, which has been created for this colloquium. And the creators of it, the musicians and artists, are eager to present it. And it will be at 8 o'clock and followed by a wonderful reception. So I hope that all of you will be here to join us at 8 o'clock for that event. And now, for all those who wish to remain, we are now open to the public discussion. Thank you.